再次跟大家问好，大家早安。2023年亚洲专业事实查核论坛是由台湾事实查核中心主办的第5届亚洲论坛，是亚太地区事实查核和媒体的盛会。台湾事实查核中心从2019年起，每年主办这场国际盛事。从2019年邀请7个国家的查核组织来台交流，2020年因为疫情遗憾停办，2021年、2022年不为疫情转为线上举行。谢谢大家在过去2年一起在线上热烈参与交流，而更开心的是，我们今天终于能够再度的面对面一起参与亚洲论坛，跟来自国际台湾的讲者和学员共同交流。今年亚洲论坛邀请了7位来自国际的讲者，会在接下来2天时间里带来事实查核的全球视野。今年论坛的报名也非常的踊跃，有将近150位媒体、学界、政治圈，还有关心资讯环境、关心事实查核的贵宾报名参与。感谢许多贵宾的莅临。事实查核生态圈也有很多重要的伙伴，因为下午的场次会陆续登场，所以我们是不是就一并请大家跟大家挥挥手 ？Michael 的伙伴，还有 CoFest 的伙伴，台湾民主实验室的伙伴，跟 IORG 的伙伴，还有社大全促会的伙伴。好，因为时间非常宝贵哦，那我们就很快的进入今天的活动开始。好，在活动开始之前呢，本来我们的董事长罗世宏老师要亲临现场跟大家问候，但因为一些私人的因素，他无法到场。不过呢，他有预录了一段影片，欢迎并且感谢大家来参与2023年亚洲专业事实查核的论坛。那我们先请工作人员帮我们播放这一段欢迎影片。
Good morning. This is Xihong Lao, the chairperson of Taiwan Fact Check Center. It's my pleasure to welcome you, and in particular, on behalf of the Taiwan Fact Check Center, I'm honored to extend a warm welcome to all our distinguished guests from renowned fact-checking organizations around the world who have gathered here in Taipei for the 2023 Asia Forum on Fact-Checking. It's a great opportunity for us to come together and address the critical issue of misinformation and its impact on society. As we know, the spread of fake news poses a significant threat to our democracies. As fact-checkers, we bear the responsibility of upholding the truth and promoting transparency in an era of information overload. The Asia Forum on Fact-Checking serves as a platform for collaboration, knowledge exchanges, and the development of best practices in the field of fact-checking. It is through collective efforts that we can strengthen the credibility of our work and counter the spread of falsehoods effectively. The Taiwan Fact Check Center is so proud to host this event for the second time and contribute to the global fight against misinformation. Taiwan has long been committed to open dialogue, freedom of speech, and the pursuit of truth. We believe that by working together and building strong networks, we can create a more informed and resilient society. I encourage all participants to actively engage in the sessions, forge meaningful connections, and explore avenues for collaboration. Let us seize this opportunity to strengthen our collective impact and advance the causes of truth and integrity in the realm of information dissemination. Once again, a warm welcome to each and every one of you. Your presence here today underscores our shared dedication to promoting accurate and reliable information. Together, let us navigate the complexities of the digital age and champion the importance of truth in our society. Thank you.
好，因为今天这2天的活动语坛阵容非常的坚强，在台湾非常难得，所以许多贵宾即使行程非常紧凑，公务事务都很繁忙，也想要腾出一段时间来到现场跟大家交流。所以刚刚唱名到的有一些贵宾呢，可能现在还没有坐在会场当中，不过有机会会在稍晚的场次来到活动的会场。那在活动正式开始之前，我们要再一次的感谢这场论坛的赞助者西敏寺民主基金会以及开放社会基金会，因为有他们的赞助，才能让我们有足够的资源筹办这场盛会。让我们帮大家鼓鼓掌，感谢他们慷慨的支援。好，那我们接下来将宝贵的时间交给台湾事实查核中心的总编审陈慧明总编审。
谢谢博化。大家好，我是台湾事实查核中心的总编审陈慧明。那很高兴我们今天能够真的在实体见面，然后开始我们2023年的亚洲论坛。那我们就开始第1场的panel。那邀请 IFCN 的新任的总监 Angie Holan， 然后还有 Alanna 上台。那今天本来在介绍 IFCN 的场次，我们安排的是 Ferdy 刚好在前几天首尔的全球查核高峰会，就是被宣布为正式担任副总监。那原来 Ferdy会到台湾来跟我们共享这个盛会。那很可惜的是，他的家人有事变故，所以因此取消了行程。但是也在这个时间，就是 Angie Holan 本来是要代表美国的查核组织 PolitiFacts 出席我们的政治与事实查核的场次。那刚好他被把作为新任的总监，所以这一次Angie 会用2个身份在我们的论坛发言。那第一个身份就是 IFCN 新任总监的身份，那第2个身份会是 PolitiFacts 总编辑的身份。所以我们在第1个场次，他会用新任总监的身份来做致辞。那一开始我们要请IFCN 的国际培训经理 Alanna 来帮我们介绍 IFCN， 然后之后 Alanna 再来请 Angie 来致辞。
Thank you for hosting this important forum on fact-checking in Asia. Fact-checking is an important form of accountability journalism and a support for information integrity. It works against misinformation and disinformation around the world and in many different cultural contexts. I'm very excited to be speaking to you today. As Summer mentioned, I have been the longtime editor-in-chief of PolitiFact for the past 10 years, directing PolitiFact's fact-checking efforts in the United States. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, I was named to be director of the International Fact-Checking Network. Thank you. Thank you. I know the network very well, having served on the advisory board for many years, yet this is still a new challenge for me. Fact-checking is at a very important moment when we have established our methodology of transparency, accuracy, and fairness, and yet misinformation is still on the march. Fact checkers are under pressure, sometimes facing harassment, and they need resources to continue their important work. Fact-checking is an important part of democracy building. People need accurate information in order to govern themselves. So fact-checking and journalism are a very important part of democracy building and civil society. My colleague, Alanna Dvorak, will be presenting a history of the International Fact-Checking Network and important statistics about our membership, as well as our plans for the future. I very much appreciate your attention today to these important matters, and I am eager to hear different ideas and plans for fact-checking in the future so that the International Fact-Checking Network can support fact-checking in every part of the world in different cultural contexts and join everyone who works to have information integrity and good, accurate information for the benefit of everyone. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Elaine.
Hello. My name, as Angie mentioned, is Alanna Dvorak. I go by Lane, so you might hear that sometimes as well. I'm the International Training Manager with the International Fact-Checking Network at the Poynter Institute. I've facilitated trainings, including in-person, hybrid, and online trainings in more than 40 countries. I've been at the Poynter Institute, where the IFCN is housed, for 5 years now, and I've been with the IFCN for 3 years. The photo's a little silly, but at Poynter, when we teach groups, we do an activity called The Real Me, which is put a photo to meet your classmates that represents you as a real person and not just a generic headshot that you might use on your website. So that is me and my dog in a bow tie. His name is Leo. Many people have met him if they have had meetings with me on Zoom because he likes to join. But we're here to talk about the International Fact-Checking Network. Has anyone heard of the IFCN before today? All right, a couple people. I like that. There's a delightful logo. The IFCN is the International Fact-Checking Network, which is housed at the Poynter Institute of Media Studies. The Poynter Institute was founded in the 70s by Nelson Poynter, who was the publisher of the then St. Petersburg Times, now the Tampa Bay Times, to help educate journalists in the United States and now all over the globe. Today, the International Fact-Checking Network consists of more than 150 fact-checking units across 60 countries, including one in Taiwan, Taiwan Fact Check Center, who has brought us all here together. It consists of 5 staffers who help support the work, including our newest director, Angie Holan, as well as 11 advisory board members. Those advisory board members vote on signatories to become part of the IFCN. We also have 4 non-voting members. What we do is promote basic standards through our code of principles, which I'll go over shortly. We monitor the trends, formats, and policy making related to fact-checking, which is much more frequent now than it was in the past. We organize Global Fact, which is the largest annual fact-checking summit in the world. It actually just took place last week in Seoul, South Korea. Many of us were there enjoying meeting new fact-checkers, great panel discussions, great interviews, and the like. We also advocate for fact-checking organizations with platforms, particularly social media platforms and governments. We offer online and offline workshops, regular articles, and a newsletter. Most recently, we've really delved into protecting fact-checkers in the fact-checking ecosystem, which we'll talk about a little bit more with the IFCN's Legal Defense Fund. And we celebrate International Fact-Checking Day, which is on April 2nd. Is April Fool's Day a thing in Taiwan? On April 1st. Indeed, April 2nd was on purpose. It's the day after we celebrate jokes, we celebrate facts on April 2nd. So we do a lot of fun activities on April 2nd, including webinars. We did I made it, a trivia quiz where you could check your fact-checking prowess on the internet. A lot of fun, entertaining things. But here's probably the most important part of the International Fact-Checking Network, which is our code of principles. In order for an organization to become a signatory to the International Fact-Checking Network, they have to agree to adhere to all of these principles established by the IFCN, including a commitment to nonpartisanship and fairness. That means you're going to fact-check both sides equally. It's very important for us to maintain our journalistic credibility that way. A commitment to transparency of sources. This means you're not trying to hide the way that you complete your fact checks. A commitment to transparency of funding and organization. This means that your website's going to publish who works at your fact-checking organization and who funds your fact-checking organization. This is very important in order to help maintain your credibility and your impartiality when completing your fact checks. This fourth one, I personally think, is one of the most important ones, which is a transparency of methodology. Essentially, that means that you're going to share on your website how you complete your fact checks. The reason why I think this is so valuable is because we have an increasing, well, I don't know if I would say increasingly media illiterate population, but we have a population that struggles to distinguish between fact and fiction online. When you share your transparency of methodology, you're helping foster media literacy in your readership or your viewership so that they can become fact checkers themselves as they navigate the wild world of mass media. Lastly, we have an open and honest corrections policy. When an organization makes a mistake, and please note, it's when, not if, most organizations have had some type of error on their website, the organization is committed to correcting that error and publishing it somewhere that it's very easily accessible to readers and or viewers. I want to talk about some of the stuff that the IFCN has done recently that we're pretty exceptionally proud of and that I think has brought a lot of value to the international community, in part in the wake of many of the crises that we've experienced both as a global society and in the media. Collaboration in the face of crises. First, I want to talk about the Coronavirus Facts Alliance, of which Taiwan Fact Check Center actually had a very outsized impact. Collaborating with the deputy director at the time, Cristina Tarraglia, to find common threads of mis and disinformation and publish it on our website. The Coronavirus Facts Alliance was launched in January of 2020 as the pandemic was really picking up steam, I guess. It united more than 100 fact checkers in publishing, sharing, and translating facts about the COVID-19 pandemic. Ultimately, more than 17,000 fact checks were published in 110 countries in 40 languages. The World Health Organization classified the COVID-19 pandemic not just as a health pandemic, but as an infodemic based on the vast amount of mis and disinformation that was circulating about COVID. The Coronavirus Facts Alliance was on the front lines of the infodemic, though perhaps we did not contribute as much in the vaccine development. Initially, a lot of the hoaxes surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic were about the origins of the virus. As the pandemic continued, a lot of the misinformation tended to be more about how COVID spreads and a lot of really bizarre supposed cures and fixes for COVID-19. Once the vaccine came out, then there was a huge wealth of information about supposed dangers and mis and disinformation about the vaccine. So here you can see on this chart kind of the variety of different topics and the amount of fact checks that were circulated about it. You see on there the spread consisted of a lot of our mis and disinformation, as well as information about the lockdown, government, medical equipment, video, hospitals, prevention, and cures. All of these fact checks, you can actually click on the fact checks there and have the specific one pop up. The screenshot I have here is about the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association discouraging people from getting the COVID-19 vaccine. But that is kind of a visual cluster of all of the different fact checks that were done by our signatories around the globe. So this is a video simulation of the distribution of COVID fact check topics. So as you can see, when it started, it talked a lot about authorities and cures. But as the pandemic continued to go on, you can see the misinformation about vaccines increased quite dramatically. Our next initiative is Ukraine Facts, and I actually want to give a huge shout out to Maldita. Ukraine Facts was a collaborative effort of fact-checkers to debunk claims related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it was spearheaded by IFCN signatory Maldita Punta Es, of which Carlos is from. It included more than 3,000 fact checks shared on the website ukrainefacts.org. IFCN signatories have debunked more than 5,400 misleading claims about the war. Obviously, the invasion of Ukraine is still ongoing. Ukraine Facts is still a live website. I highly encourage you to check it out. One of the other things that I think is valuable to add also about the Coronavirus Facts Alliance, we utilize a lot of WhatsApp tip lines to collect fact checks, submissions from our readers so that we know what the public wants us to fact check. It's also a great way to dispense fact checks. So this is a map from Ukraine Facts that shows where a lot of the mis and disinformation is circulating from and where the fact checks are coming from. As you might imagine, many of the pieces of information are coming from Ukraine. Checks out. It's worth noting that a lot of the pieces of mis and disinformation are coming from Russian trolls and troll farms that pump out a significant amount of mis and disinformation on a professional level. They have people who essentially create fake profiles and fake news websites online to help spread this mis and disinformation. We had an author at Global Fact that discussed her research into the troll farms. If you go to globalfact10.com, you can watch a replay of that interview. She is a very fascinating Finnish journalist who spent 2.5 years researching the Russian mis and disinformation that comes out. What's the current state of fact-checking today? I think there's reason to be optimistic, perhaps cautiously optimistic. This is essentially the way that our fact-checking organizations currently operate. We have more nonprofit organizations at 57%, with 36% as for-profit media outlets, and a somewhat dwindling number of academic initiatives, which are fact-checking organizations that are partnered up with universities. The number of organizations created has slowed down a bit. The peak of fact-checking organizations that were being created was between 2015 and 2020. 17 organizations were actually launched in 2019, so that was a peak for us. But fact-checking is not brand new. The oldest fact-checking organization that we have surveyed in the International Fact-Checking Network actually comes from 1994. I was but a wee child then. It's true. But there are still some organizations that are being created. I mean, obviously this survey came out, we polled at the end of 2021. So theoretically, there are more units that will be started up in the coming years. We certainly hope so. This is probably one of the most fascinating pieces of data that we found, which is a shift in the operating budgets in 2022. More fact-checking units are operating on larger budgets than we've ever had before, which implies an increased capacity in organizations to commit to fact-checking and tackling misinformation around a variety of public interest topics. We've had an increase in organizations operating with a budget of more than $500,000. Last year it was 18.6%. This year it is almost 25% at 24.7%. So that's a really optimistic sign, these larger operating budgets. Moreover, the amount of outlets that are operating on a budget of $20,000 decreased from 25.9% last year to just 9.7% this year. So fewer than 10% of organizations have that 20% budget, which we are thrilled about. That being said, one of the leading funders is still the Meta third-party fact-checking network, which is a partnership between fact-checking units and Meta to help circulate fact checks online. Meta is the leading funding source at about 45% for the majority of our organizations. Grants and consist of about 29%, and donations and membership has increased from about 4% to 6.5%. TikTok has proved to be a new partnership source this year in 2022 for a lot of our media outlets. While we're thrilled at the increase in operating budget with these partnerships, there is an uncertain environment around these tech partnerships, particularly in recent months. I'm sure everyone here has followed the wave of layoffs that have struck a lot of the technology companies, including Meta. Meta just completed their third round of layoffs for many staffers, including staffers that many of us in the fact-checking unit or fact-checking world have worked with. And I know Facebook can be a difficult company, but I think you guys will agree with me that a lot of the people that have been laid off are good people trying to do really good work in a very difficult environment. And so we are hoping to continue to increase memberships and other partnerships to not rely as heavily on these tech platforms in the wake of the economic instability some of them are facing. And just to continue that really optimistic viewpoint, here are some of the challenges that our outlets are facing. I think number one for a lot of our organizations is the increased harassment that our fact checkers and journalists are facing, and that's everywhere. It's not just in fledgling democracies, it's in the West as well, and is oftentimes led by public figures, which is very frustrating. That harassment has also led to an increasing distrust in journalists and fact-checking as a whole. Fact-checking is not as effective when you have politicians say that those facts are fake or not real. Also legal ramifications. There's limited resources to fact-checking every consequential claim, and restricted press freedoms in certain parts of the world. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these legislative efforts to restrict press freedom increasing globally. This is a survey from IFCN signatory Faktograph, which is a Croatian-led fact-checking outlet. These preliminary results come from a pioneering survey in Europe that explores the impact of harassment and disinformation targeting European fact-checkers. It was part of the International Press Institute's Decoding Disinformation Playbook, which they did in partnership with Faktograph, again from Croatia, and TAZ, which is a German outlet. 41 of the 68 European fact-checking organizations participated in this data collection from December 2021 to January 2023. And the results are kind of harrowing. 90% of fact-checking outlets experienced smear campaigns and online abuse from politicians, government officials, public figures. 7 out of 10 experienced prolonged and coordinated efforts. And these efforts include things like doxing, which is sharing personal information about these journalists online so that they're harassed not only online, but in their real offline life as well. 3/4 of the outlets polled experienced experienced some form of online harassment. And the frequency is staggering as well. I myself, with the IFCN, I keep an inbox that is just a slew of hate mail that we get every day, particularly when people are fact-checked on Facebook. They tend to send something to the IFCN, sometimes violent threats, sometimes just kind of deranged scrawlings, but I think it's something that most of our fact-checking units here have experienced in one way or another, unfortunately. One of the things that the IFCN has tried to do to help stem the wave of legal ramifications is by creating the Legal Defense Fund with Reporters Without Borders. It's made possible with support from RSF and the Meta and the Google News Initiative, and it provides funds of up to $40,000 for verified signatories facing harassment and legal threats related to fact-checking. A lot of the efforts of organizations to legally target fact-checkers is to either intimidate them to stop coverage or, as often is the case, to bankrupt these outlets so that they can't complete coverage anymore. Many of the people who have applied for funding from the Legal Defense Fund so far have faced imprisonment, bankruptcy, or closure of their outlets. So far, 3 fact-checking outlets from Brazil, Nigeria, and Australia have received these funds. The funds are distributed based on an 11-member selection committee, There's representatives in this committee from North America, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East and North Africa, Western Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, as well as a representative from Reporters Without Borders, and my colleague Anak Nyariki, who is our Community and Impact Manager. We hope that this will help support outlets to continue to complete their valuable work in fact-checking in the wake of some pretty nasty legal ramifications just for doing their job. And please note that we're not supporting outlets who are committing slander or libel. These are outlets that are just facing negative ramifications from folks who don't want them to share the truth. Here's some things we're looking forward to in the future. The Global Fact Fund is one of the things that we are most excited about. Created with the support from YouTube, it provides $12 million for fact-checking organizations around the globe to strengthen and develop their operational, production, and engagement capacities at local and regional levels, to be on the front lines of the fact-checking fight. We hope to increase the quality, volume, frequency, scale, and impact of their abilities and activities, as well as improve the professionalism of these outlets and to help those outlets improve their audience's ability to critically assess mass media and social media. The funds will be available in tiers of $25,000, $50,000, and $100,000. The grants are distributed in what are called Build, Grow, and Engage, which all have different goals. We recently announced our winners of our first Build grant. So we awarded it to 35 different fact-checking organizations serving audiences in 45 countries. All of the opportunities will be available by the end of 2024. You can, if you visit pointer.org or just Google IFCN YouTube grant, you can see some of the great proposals that our signatories have submitted to for the first part of the Build grant. Lastly, we do have a targeted effort to expand in the Asia-Pacific region. We've recently welcomed 2 new signatories from Japan, which is the first signatories the IFCN has had in Japan, so that's very exciting. And we're targeting efforts to cultivate new signatories in the Asia-Pacific region. This includes training and webinars for journalists, academics, and aspiring fact-checkers free of charge, thanks to support from Meta. And here is my shameless plug for that. This is a QR code. If you're interested in taking more classes, or if you're interested in taking a class teaching you how to do fact-checking, talking more about the history of the International Fact-Checking Network, it's available in 15 languages native to the Asia-Pacific region, and it's free of charge. I highly encourage you to take it. It includes a course in Mandarin, so feel free to sign up. You do have to create a Pointer account, but it's free to do that too, so all good. I think Angie and myself would love to take any questions that people have on the IFCN or the fact-checking ecosystem, so I'm gonna go sit down next to Angie so that we can hand the microphone off to each other.
好，谢谢Alanna，帮我们开箱 IFCN。那常常会有人问问题哦，就是问我们说，到底谁查核组织？那今天查核组织的单位，国际事实查核联盟就来到现场。那IFCN 肩负着统合全球查核组织的工作，一起共同面对查核组织的共同面对的挑战，那包括各国的政府的压迫，然后给予记者支持。那另外也希望更多的国家能够有查核组织成立跟加入。那所以今天 Alanna 跟 Angie 在这边就是可以让大家来问问题，更多我们对IFCN 的好奇可以在这时候提问出来。那大家可以用这个 Slido 扫 QR code 进来，然后把你的问题直接打在 Slido 上面。那 我先来问第一个问题哦。那待会大家会更多的问题进来，我来再帮大家提问。那第一个问题就是，Angie 上任新任总监的这个时候，刚好也是 Global Facts 的10周年。那 Global Facts 是全球的查核组织共同的一个年会。那10年前就在伦敦的一个小小的教室，然后很多的查核组织一起聚会，共同讨论应该要有一个全球的联盟。那到今年已经有154个成员共同在首尔参加，那参加的人数到了500人。那 Angie 可不可以来帮我们分享，就是从这10年来整个 Global Facts 全球查核组织成长的情况，还有面对的挑战？
Yes, we've seen amazing growth in the past 10 years among the fact-checking organizations. Our first conference was in London in 2014. It was very small. I believe we had about 50 people in attendance. This year in Seoul, we had more than 500 people coming live, and more people joined us online. And I should say, if you're interested in seeing some of the conference material, much of it was recorded on a website, globalfact10.com. And I believe you should be able to log in there and see some of the work that's been done. Over the past 10 years, we've seen fact-checking organizations grow generally. So we've seen standalone organizations that were formed by individuals who were just committed to fact-checking. And they would grow from a team of about 3 or 4 people to today, some of these are 15 people, 16 people, 50 people, 70 people. Some of these fact-checking organizations have grown to be quite large. Not only do they have fact-checking, but they do media literacy training, they do outreach to the public. A lot of this has been made possible because of additional resources, because of the technology platforms supporting fact-checking, because of support from civil society foundations, and because of fundraising from their own readers. PolitiFact, for example, raises monthly donations from a broad readership, and that's become an important stabilizing revenue stream. And it's basically people, everyday people who are committed to fact-checking. I think as much as there is misinformation in society, I think we can't underestimate the number of people who feel passionately that fact-checking is needed, that they want good information to make decisions about voting, about health, about the economy. So we have, overall, we've seen the number of organizations increase, and we've seen small organizations grow into large, mature organizations.
Okay, there are several questions here. 这里有很多的问题哦，那我就用英文来念，然后请翻译团队用中文来协助翻译。好，那除了刚刚提到的法律except for legal defense funds, does IFCN has other methods to help fact checkers' work to be able to continue?
Yes. I think the most important thing that the IFCN does is bring fact checkers together in a community to discuss challenges and solutions. So when we have been harassed, we've been able to come together and discuss how to address it. Sometimes the answer is to ignore it, but sometimes the answer is to band together and to issue a public response. And certainly, I think one thing that I've experienced myself is just being able to talk to other fact checkers and saying, this job is really hard, and having someone say, yes, it is really hard, but it is worth doing. So that sense of community is, I think, our number one way of support. But we're also looking for other means of support. The online harassment issue is very challenging. The IFCN recently engaged with a public relations firm to create a plan for responding to harassment. I think it's an interesting plan. It's not perfect, and some of us felt like it needed some work, but it was something that we would try. So we try different things. Not everything succeeds, but I think the harassment is one way we are addressing harassment is important. And then finally, we had many good discussions in Seoul about sustainability. And I think that is probably our next most important challenge. I see two challenges: communication, which is talking to the public about why fact-checking is important, why it's independent, transparent, and fair, that communication piece. And the other piece is sustainability. We want to diversify our support from technology platforms to get broad means of support. So, Lane, am I forgetting anything?
好，那我帮大家补充一下，如果你对某一个问题比较感兴趣的话，你可以按 like， 可以按那个赞，然后让别人提出来的问题，你也想问的，就是可以更快的升到上面来。好，那下一个问题是They would like to follow the legal defense form. The audience would like to know in which country the fact checkers has the harassment status. In bad situation.
In which country do they face harassment?
Right.
All of them, I think. Right? Am I wrong? I mean, I think every single country. I think some face it worse than others. Some have it much more institutionalized with the government, right? I'm sure you guys, he wasn't a fact checker, but I'm sure you guys remember the plane that was literally landed in Belarus so they could arrest a journalist. But every country faces harassment, whether it's from public officials, whether it is from random people online. I think all of us around the globe have faced harassment. Even at PolitiFact, some of our young reporters, the press secretary for the governor has just had it out for them, where she was following them on Twitter and just tagging them in stuff to get her people to harass them almost daily. Do you have anything else, or it's just everybody?
Yeah, I think there are some contexts that are harder than others. Certainly the Philippines is one country where it's been very, very challenging. I mean, I was having a conversation this morning about, what is worse, being called out by name online, or is it the government coming to knock on your door and saying that they want your hard drive? I mean, so there are different kinds of challenges in different contexts, and it's hard to say one is worse than the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because we have lots of questions, so we need to have the quick and the short answer. So the second question is, IFCN are fact-checking fact checkers, but how does IFCN has checked them yourself?
Right.
How did you make everything fair and make decisions fairly to all the signatories? So how did you make sure the organization has democracy?
Right. We try to practice as much transparency as possible with the IFCN. We have an advisory board with representatives from every continent, and we have an open listserv where signatories discuss many issues. So we tried to make it as transparent as possible while balancing moving quickly and getting resources to fact checkers. There's a lot of logistical challenges that the IFCN addresses. So we try to balance that participation of our membership with being able to make decisions and distribute grants and to address issues as they come up on an effective basis.
And because IFCN distribution the grants, and is there any conflict when you do the do the distribution? And is there any conflict between organizations, especially for the smaller branch? They don't have enough grant from, if they don't have enough the support or grant from IFCN?
Sure. I mean, every time we distribute a grant, we have an independent committee that's almost, if it has anyone from the IFCN, it has one person. For example, the Legal Defense Fund has one representative from IFCN, but typically it is an external grant or an external committee that helps distribute the grant. Masato's sat on one for one of the grants that I managed, and it's a lot of people on that committee are part of the IFCN, but a lot of them are not. Like, they're academics or journalists that are not affiliated with the IFCN, to try and keep that impartiality of that when we're distributing grants, it's a blind-based system. It is, we are looking at the application and on the merits of the application. That being said, I do think, I mean, one of the things that I would like to work on personally as the training manager is creating resources to help some of the smaller organizations compete for these grants, because some of our signatories are composed of 3 and 4 people that don't have the dedicated resources. You know, some of our larger fact-checking organizations, all they do is, like, that's that person's job, is they apply for grants and they have a higher capacity for it. So I know personally, like, one of my professional goals is to have more resources for these smaller organizations, so that they have as good a chance of earning some of these grants as our organizations of 70 people.
Mm-hmm. And Alanna, in your speech, you mentioned IFCN want to collaborate with TikTok. So what's the collaboration item is, and also the misinfo for us, the disinformation. Sometimes related to China, and so how does IFCN collaborate with TikTok, which is a China company?
Just to clarify, the IFCN itself, we don't do a ton of collaborative work with TikTok. Our signatories do collaborative work with TikTok, and a lot of it is, like, media-wise works with TikTok to try and work to spread fact-checking on TikTok. Because you're right, TikTok is rife with mis and disinformation. I saw one of the questions here on the board, not to jump you, is, you know, TikTok sponsored Global Fact. They're a controversial company. Did IFCN have any debates or concerns about the sponsorship? We literally had a main stage session debating the merits of TikTok. Masato was one of the representatives talking about the dangers of TikTok. We are very aware of it, but a lot of the sponsorship is working with people trying to fact check on TikTok.
Yeah, I want to talk about the conflict of interest with the fact checkers and the platform. The relationship between the fact checkers and the platforms is a business relationship. So in many cases, the platforms have contracts with the fact checkers fact check content on the platforms. So it's an interesting relationship. It's not, there's some skepticism, I think, of the fact checkers toward the platforms, but we also have to partner together to do this fact checking. And I know in the US, what we've seen is a lot of our readership is on these platforms. They're being exposed to misinformation. And PolitiFact made a decision a long time ago that we wanted to work with the platforms to reduce misinformation. And I think all the fact checkers that work with the platforms have made that decision, that it's going to be a relationship where there are mutual benefits to trying to fight misinformation. But it can be a fraught relationship because the platforms don't always do everything they can to reduce misinformation. The platforms do sponsor our conferences, and what that creates is an environment where the fact checkers can come together. They have a critical mass of fact checkers. We can interrogate the platforms. We can try to discover what their plans are. We can offer them feedback for how those relationships can work better. And they share their point of view on how they see fighting misinformation on their platform. So I guess overall, I would describe it as a relationship of friendly skepticism, where we're working together, but we're kind of watching each other at the same time. I don't think the fact checkers want to be overly dependent on the platforms for revenue, and that is definitely one of our future challenges.
Mm-hmm. And besides TikTok, the audience asks, since disinformation exposed increasing on YouTube, does IFCN has any plan to fight that for coming 2 years? And
yes, there is literally, IFCN literally has a committee trying to work with YouTube what's the YouTube working group? I think some of you guys are on it. We've composed, 2 or 3 letters to YouTube now, trying to get them to do more about the mis and disinfo on the platform. So there is an effort to be made. I think a lot of us are kind of dismayed at some of the recent announcements that have been made on YouTube. We thought there would be more optimism, but they're still working with us at least.
I know we're running out of time. I just want to say, just to set the landscape for you, Meta has the largest fact-checking program and works with the most fact-checkers and devotes the most revenue to its efforts. Then TikTok also has relationship with a smaller number of fact-checkers, much smaller. Their program works a little bit differently, but I would say, Meta probably works with, over 100 fact-checkers, and TikTok is working with maybe 20 fact-checkers. And then YouTube does not really work with fact-checkers in a formal way. YouTube is, to me, the outlier. It does not have a formal fact-checking program. We've been asking them to establish one, and they have not established one. They did give us this grant program that Lane talked about, but they do not have anything comparable with Meta as far as a fact-checking program.
Mm-hmm. And the audience is curious. Fact-checking organizations are often considered to have specific political parties. How do we approve neutrality of inspection of fact-checking organization?
Yeah, this is a complex topic as well. I do not think that fact-checkers favor one political party over another according to our IFCN principles. We are very independent. However, what we find in different cultural contexts is some political parties have more tolerance themselves for misinformation. So some parties, the leaders seem like if there's misinformation going around, they're okay with that, and other political parties don't seem to feel that way. So this creates some real ethical conflicts, because among the fact checkers, our top ethical obligation is to the truth. So sometimes it does create these perceptions that fact checkers are favoring one side or the other. Politically, that is not the case. The fact checkers are dedicated to evidence, logic, documentation. So I think that we fact checkers need to be sensitive to perceptions and do our best to always present our case for being independent, but we can't compromise our ethical obligation to the truth, because if we were to do that, the fact-checking enterprise does not work. We must stay committed to truthfulness and accuracy. That is our top ethical imperative.
Mm-hmm. And there are more questions about AI, about deepfake, and about politics. So actually, in our following panel, we will talk about those topics. So maybe we can save those questions to the next panels today. So would you like to have a very short end? Then we will finish this panel.
I would just like to say thank you for the wonderful questions. The fact-checking community deserves scrutiny just like every other community in civil society. So we are always happy to talk about our methods, our plans, and Thank you for your attention.